She was a small girl with curious eyes that always seemed to be searching for something she could not name. The kind of child who noticed things others passed by without thinking. The way sunlight fell on a windowsill, the rhythm of raindrops on the roof, the soft hum of the wind through trees. All of it felt like music to her. But in a house filled with ordinary noise, she hardly expected anyone to understand. Her parents worked long hours, leaving the house quiet except for the ticking of the old clock and the occasional creak of the floorboards. They had little money, little time, and even less patience for dreams that did not promise immediate results. Yet she had a secret. A corner of the living room, tucked beside the worn couch, held an old upright piano. It had been there for years, left by someone who no longer wanted it. Its keys yellowed with age, some sticking, others making a dull sound that echoed in strange ways. To anyone else, it was just an old piece of furniture. To her, it was a treasure chest, a place where she could lose herself and create something that existed nowhere else in the world. Her first touch was tentative. She pressed one key, then another, unsure what sound would come. The note was soft and uneven, but it made her heart leap. She pressed more, trying to remember the tunes she had heard in her head. The sound was crude, imperfect, almost like a whisper that wanted to become a song. She closed her eyes, and suddenly, it didn't matter that the notes didn't match any real music. Felt alive. Felt like something she had always known. No one noticed at first. Her parents were busy, her older siblings were absorbed in their own worlds. Her small experiments at the piano went unseen, unremarked upon. When her mother passed by and asked what she was doing, she shrugged. "Just playing," she said, her fingers still dancing on the keys. Her mother nodded absently, too tired to look closely. To anyone else, it was just a child making noise. To her, it was the beginning of everything. She spent hours in that corner. She copied melodies she heard on the radio. She tried to remember the songs people hummed around her. And soon, she began creating her own. At first, the tunes were simple. One note after another, sometimes repeating, sometimes leaping in ways that made no sense. But there was an honesty to it, a rawness that only a person who had no formal training could have. She played for herself, and sometimes, in the quiet of the evening, she felt as though the piano was speaking back. The notes told her secrets she didn't know she wanted to hear, memories she didn't yet have, dreams she couldn't yet name. Her neighbors sometimes stopped by. Some were curious, some amused, and some were judgmental. "Just a little girl banging on keys," one would say with a smirk. Another would roll her eyes and mutter, "Don't you have homework to do?" But she didn't hear them. Or rather, she heard them. And yet their words could not touch the music. It was her world, her secret place, a place where she could exist without judgment, without expectation, without fear. At school, she was quiet. She didn't have many friends, not because she didn't want them, but because she found herself always somewhere else in her mind, listening to rhythms and imagining melodies. While other children were trading stories about television shows or gossiping about classmates, she thought about the sound of leaves scraping across the pavement, the way the wind shifted patterns in the trees, the tiny differences in how her shoes made a sound on the wooden floor. Every sound seemed important. Every sound seemed like it could become music. Her teachers noticed she was bright, attentive in certain subjects, especially those that allowed her to think creatively. But she struggled with rules and strict instructions. She didn't like when someone told her to do something the right way, because in her mind, there were so many ways it could be done. Her small, simple attempts at drawing, writing, or counting often surprised her teachers, who couldn't understand how such small, timid gestures could hold such precise rhythm or unique pattern. At home, the piano became her companion. She would sit for hours pressing keys softly at first, building up courage to try bolder sounds. Sometimes she would play a single note over and over until it felt right. Sometimes she would invent tiny melodies that seemed to grow organically, as if the music already existed and she was merely helping it find its voice. Occasionally, she would stand back and just listen, letting her imagination fill in the spaces, hearing songs that were not really there, yet somehow complete. One rainy afternoon, she discovered a new feeling. She had been playing quietly, almost as if the sound itself was a secret she did not want anyone to hear. The rain pattered against the windows in gentle bursts, and she realized she could make the piano do the same. She pressed notes lightly, then harder, then faster, then slower, imitating the rhythm of the falling drops. It was not perfect, but it was alive. She felt as if she had discovered a hidden connection between the world outside and the world inside. For the first time, she realized that music could do more than just fill silence. It could reflect life itself. Occasionally, her small sister would peek around the doorway. "Why do you play like that?" she would ask. "It's just keys." But the small girl didn't answer. How could she explain that each note carried a feeling, a thought, a story? How could she tell someone that pressing a key could make a heartbeat, a memory, a dream? She just smiled faintly and continued, letting the music speak for her. Evenings were her favorite time. The house would grow quiet, the world outside settling into night, and she could play freely without interruption. Sometimes her mother would pass through and stop briefly, drawn in by the unusual melody. "That's nice," she would say, a little surprised at the depth hidden in such a simple tune. Her father, too tired to notice at first, began to pause and listen as he entered the room. He never fully understood what she was doing, but he began to sense that this wasn't ordinary play. There was something special in the way she pressed the keys, in the way the notes lingered longer than expected, in the way they felt bigger than the small living room could contain. Neighbors started noticing too. One evening, an elderly woman walking by heard the soft notes drifting through the window. She paused, listening, and frowned. "It's just a child," she muttered. But her brow furrowed as she realized that the melody was somehow richer than it should have been. There was a confidence in it, a depth that no one her age should possess. Still, most people dismissed it as coincidence, or perhaps imagination. But the girl didn't care. She didn't play for approval. She played because it mattered to her. There were days when she became frustrated. The notes didn't match what she heard in her head. Sometimes her small fingers could not reach the keys the way she imagined. Sometimes the piano itself seemed uncooperative, the old wood groaning or the keys sticking stubbornly. She would slump back in defeat, feeling as though the music had abandoned her. But the next day, she would return, pressing the keys again, more determined. Every mistake was a step toward discovery. Every wrong note a small lesson in patience. One afternoon, she discovered improvisation. A radio played a song in another room, and she tried to mimic it, but she didn't follow the melody exactly. She added little twists, tiny changes, small bursts of rhythm that were not in the original. Felt exciting, daring. For the first time, she realized that she could make music her own, that she didn't have to copy anyone else. She could create, she could express, and that small thrill, the feeling of inventing something entirely hers, became the fire that would push her forward. By the time she reached the age of 10, the small girl had transformed the old piano corner into a private sanctuary. It wasn't just a place to play. It was a place to think, to dream, to explore the world in a way no one else could understand. Her parents had noticed her persistence, the way she would sit for hours without getting bored, the way her face lit up when she discovered a new combination of notes. They still did not fully understand, but they began to realize that this simple pastime was more than it appeared. It was something alive, something powerful, something that might one day reach beyond the walls of their small home. And so the small girl continued. She played every day, sometimes for minutes, sometimes for hours, always searching, always experimenting. Her tunes were still simple to the untrained ear, but there was a spark hidden inside them, a hint of something much greater waiting to emerge. Every key she pressed, every melody she whispered, every small triumph and failure was a step toward discovering the full extent of her fiery, untapped piano genius. A genius that the world would soon have no choice but to notice. Even in her small, quiet life, there was magic. And it all began with the first soft touch of her fingers on the piano. A touch that would one day reveal a brilliance no one expected from such a humble beginning. The small girl's life began to change in subtle ways, though she hardly noticed at first. The old piano remained her companion, but now, she began to notice that the world outside her small home seemed to listen more carefully when she played. Sometimes it was a neighbor leaning on the fence, pretending not to watch, or her mother pausing longer than usual in the doorway. She didn't play for attention, yet the music seemed to reach beyond the walls of the house, stirring something she could not yet understand. One afternoon, the girl found herself sitting at the piano with a notebook in hand. She had begun to write down the tiny melodies she imagined, even though she did not know musical notes. It was a secret journal, a record of the sounds she wanted to create. She scribbled lines of letters and symbols, little marks that only she could understand. As she played, she matched the notes to the lines, trying to capture what she heard in her head. It was clumsy, imperfect, but it gave her a new sense of control, a sense that she could capture the music before it vanished into the air. It was during one of these quiet afternoons that she first met someone who truly noticed her. A distant relative had come to visit, an older woman with kind eyes and a gentle smile. She paused at the doorway as the girl played a soft tune, tilting her head as though listening for something she could not name. Most adults would have dismissed it as childish noise, but she did not. She stepped closer, letting the music wash over her, and finally spoke. "That is different," she said softly, almost as if testing the words in her mouth. "You have a gift." The girl stopped playing and looked up, startled. She had heard the word talent before, but it had never been spoken to her directly. Most people thought she was simply a child having fun, making random noises. This woman, however, seemed to see the music inside her, the hidden shapes and patterns she had been trying to find for years. I just play what I feel," the girl said quietly, her fingers still resting on the keys. "That's exactly why it's special," the woman replied. "You don't play what others tell you to play. You play from your heart. That is rare." The words lingered in the girl's mind long after the woman had gone. She began to feel a new kind of excitement, a thrill she had never known. Perhaps her music was more than just a secret escape. Perhaps it could become something bigger. That night she could hardly sleep. She kept thinking about the piano, the way the keys felt under her fingers, the way the notes seemed to carry emotion she couldn't explain. She imagined herself playing in a bigger space, where more people could hear. Not for fame, not for applause, but because she wanted the music to live outside her small home, to touch others in the way it touched her. The next day, she tried something new. She played a tune she had never played before, something bolder and more complex than her usual melodies. At first, the notes felt awkward, as if her fingers did not belong on the keys. But slowly, the music began to flow. She added little pauses, small changes in rhythm, tiny ornaments that made the tune richer. When she finished, she sat back, listening to the silence that followed. For the first time, she realized that she could create music that surprised even herself. Her small sister wandered in again, curious as always. "It sounded different," she said, "like it wasn't just a song, but a story." The girl smiled faintly. She didn't explain how the music felt like a story to her as well. Some things were too deep for words. School became a new kind of challenge. She was no longer content to simply play for herself. She wanted to learn more, to understand the music she could imagine in her mind. She tried to follow lessons in the classroom, but often the instructions felt limiting. She wanted to explore, to experiment, to find her own way. Sometimes she felt frustrated because no one seemed to understand the path she wanted to take. The other children were learning scales and exercises, memorizing simple songs, while she was already imagining melodies that twisted and turned beyond the teacher's instructions. It was during a school music class that she first noticed the difference between herself and others. While her classmates struggled with the simplest exercises, she found the patterns easy to understand. She could hear the rhythm before the teacher clapped, anticipate the harmony before the notes were played. Her teacher noticed, too, though she did not say much at the time. The girl did not seek attention, and in her quiet way, she simply continued to play, letting the music reveal her potential. At home, the piano remained her sanctuary. She began to experiment more boldly, combining melodies she had heard on the radio with tunes she invented herself. She would play one note, then another, and slowly, the notes began to connect in ways that surprised her. Sometimes she laughed aloud when a melody sounded just right. Sometimes she frowned when a tune did not match the one in her head. But every attempt brought her closer to understanding her own voice. One afternoon, a neighbor came by unexpectedly. He had heard the music drifting through the walls and was curious. He listened silently for a while, leaning against the doorframe. Finally, he clapped softly. "You have a natural feel for this," he said. "You can really make the piano speak." The girl's cheeks turned red. She wasn't used to praise. Most people either ignored her playing or dismissed it as childish fun. But his words felt different. They didn't pressure her to perform or be perfect. They simply acknowledged what she had always known inside. That music was alive in her hands. Encouraged, she began to spend even more time at the piano. She experimented with timing, with dynamics, with the way each note could convey emotion. She discovered that slowing down a passage could make it feel sad, that a sudden burst of speed could make it feel excited. She learned to listen not just to the notes, but to the space between them, the silence that made the music breathe. Each day, the piano became less of an instrument and more of a partner, responding to her intentions, reflecting her feelings. The small girl also discovered that she could imitate sounds from her surroundings. The sound of raindrops on the roof became delicate, tapping notes. The creak of the old door became a low, slow rhythm. Even the footsteps of people passing outside inspired tiny bursts of melody. She realized that music was everywhere, and that she could capture it, shape it, and make it her own. One evening, she decided to play for her parents. They had been busy, tired from their work, but she wanted them to hear what she had learned. She played a simple tune at first, just enough to draw their attention. Then she added the small twists she had discovered over months of practice. The soft pauses, the sudden bursts of notes, the little improvisations that made the melody her own. Her mother's eyes widened. Her father stopped moving for a moment, listening. Neither of them could fully explain what they felt, but they knew it was special. They had not understood the depth hidden behind their daughter's quiet afternoons, but now it was clear. There was something remarkable in her music, something that could not be ignored. That night, the girl went to bed with a sense of satisfaction she had never known before. She realized that music was no longer just a secret hobby. It was a language she understood, a way to express what words could not. It was the first step in a journey she did not yet fully see, a journey that would take her far beyond the small house, the worn piano, and the quiet streets she had always known. She also began to dream more vividly. In her dreams, she played in concert halls, on stages far larger than her living room. She imagined people listening to her music, feeling the emotions she poured into it. These dreams felt real, even if they seemed impossible. And when she woke, she pressed her small fingers to the keys, trying to recreate even a fragment of the dream. Over time, the small girl noticed that her music was changing. The tunes she played were no longer purely simple. They began to have layers, with notes that suggested more than one emotion at a time. Sometimes a melody would feel happy and sad simultaneously. Sometimes a rhythm would make her feel excited and peaceful at the same time. She realized that she was beginning to find her own voice, a voice that was unique, fiery, and deeply alive. It was during one of these afternoons that she finally understood the power of what she was doing. She had been playing a tune she had invented, one that twisted and turned in ways no one else had heard. Her small sister watched, her eyes wide. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "It's alive." The girl smiled. That was exactly how it felt to her. It was alive. And she knew, even then, that this was only the beginning. The small, simple tunes she had played so far were just the first sparks. A fire was growing inside her, a passion that could not be contained by the walls of her home, the old piano, or the quiet neighborhood. It was something more, something that had been waiting for her all along, hidden beneath ordinary beginnings, waiting for the right hands to awaken it. From that day on, the small girl played with a new determination. Every note was a step forward, every melody a chance to explore further. She was no longer just passing time. She was discovering herself one key at a time. And though no one yet fully understood the genius quietly unfolding in that little living room, she knew that it was real, powerful, and unstoppable. The small girl's talent continued to grow quietly, almost unnoticed by most people around her. Yet, deep inside, she felt that one day her music might reach beyond the walls of her home. She had begun to play more boldly, experimenting with melodies that twisted and turned in ways no one else could imagine. She no longer feared mistakes. Every wrong note, every stumble, taught her something new about rhythm, sound, and expression. Her hands became confident, her mind sharper, her ears keener. The music she created was alive in a way that seemed almost magical. One afternoon, an announcement at school changed everything. There would be a small talent showcase in the community hall, an event for children to perform anything they wanted: singing, dancing, storytelling, or playing an instrument. The small girl had never performed in front of a crowd before. The thought made her stomach twist. Her heart raced, but not from fear alone. There was a spark of excitement she had never felt, a whisper that perhaps this could be the first step toward something bigger. At home, she told her parents cautiously. They were supportive but worried. "It's a lot of people," her father said. "Are you sure you want to do this?" Her mother added, "It's fine to try, but don't get upset if it doesn't go perfectly." She nodded quietly. They didn't fully understand what she could do, and she wasn't ready to explain it yet. She only knew she had to try. The day of the showcase arrived, and the small girl found herself standing backstage, the sounds of chatter and laughter filling the air. Children practiced their routines, some visibly nervous, some overly confident. She clutched her small hands together, imagining the piano waiting for her in the corner. The old instrument seemed familiar, as if it had traveled with her in spirit, ready to bring her music to life. When her turn came, she walked slowly to the piano. The room was bigger than her living room, the audience larger than she had ever faced. She could hear whispers, the polite shuffling of people adjusting their seats, the soft tap of feet on the floor. The spotlight shone on her, making the piano keys gleam in a harsh light. For a moment, doubt crept in. She had never performed like this before. What if she made a mistake? What if the music didn't sound right? She took a deep breath and sat down. Her fingers hovered above the keys. The room seemed to hold its breath too. Then she pressed the first note. It was soft, almost shy, but it cut through the quiet like a small flame in darkness. She continued, her fingers moving with growing confidence, following the melody she had carried in her mind for months. Slowly, the tune unfolded, simple yet full of feeling, gentle yet unexpectedly expressive. At first, the audience murmured politely. Some thought it was cute, a small girl playing simple music. But as the tune continued, subtle changes in tempo, gentle shifts in rhythm, and unexpected harmonies began to emerge. The music seemed to breathe, to tell a story without words. Heads tilted, eyebrows lifted, the murmuring faded into silence. People listened more closely, sensing something extraordinary. Her small sister sat in the front row, eyes wide. She had always admired her sisters playing at home, but seeing it here, in this larger space, it felt different. The music seemed bigger, more alive, more powerful. She could feel the emotion, the thought, the care behind each note. Even the adults leaned forward, as if afraid to miss a single moment of the melody. The small girl had reached a moment she had not expected. She began to improvise, adding little flourishes she had never tried before. The piano responded under her fingers like a living partner, carrying her intentions perfectly. Each note spoke, each pause mattered. Each rise and fall in the melody brought the room to life. The music was no longer just hers. It was a shared experience, connecting her with everyone who listened. At one point, a faint gasp ran through the audience. It was subtle, almost unnoticeable if you weren't listening carefully, but it gave her courage. People were noticing. They were recognizing what she had always known herself. This was not ordinary playing. This was something rare, something precious. The small girl felt her heart swell with pride, not for herself, but for the music itself. She played on, her small hands dancing across the keys, improvising, exploring, creating in real time. The audience began to lean in, drawn by the unexpected depth of the simple tune. Some eyes glistened with emotion. A few whispered to each other, trying to describe what they were hearing. Some people were puzzled, unsure how such a small, unassuming child could produce something so rich, so moving. Others felt tears prickling their eyes, caught off guard by the beauty of it. By the time she finished, the room was silent. The final note lingered in the air, a gentle echo of everything that had come before. The small girl sat still, her fingers resting lightly on the keys, unsure whether she had done well or poorly. She only knew the music had been true. It had said what she wanted it to say, and that was enough. Then the applause began. At first soft, polite, like a ripple in water. Then louder, more insistent, filling the hall. Some people stood, clapping and cheering, while others remained seated, overwhelmed by the sudden realization that they had witnessed something special. The small girl blinked in surprise. She had never heard anything like this before. The sound washed over her, a mixture of pride, relief, and disbelief. One of the teachers came forward, smiling. "That was incredible," they said. "Most adults could not play with that level of feeling. You have something very rare." The small girl smiled faintly, unsure how to respond. Praise felt strange, almost foreign, but she allowed herself a quiet sense of satisfaction. She had shared her music and people had listened. More than that, they had felt it. After the performance, a few older musicians approached her. They asked her questions, curious about her technique, her inspiration, and how she had learned to play. She answered as best she could, modestly, explaining that she just played what she felt. They nodded, impressed, recognizing the spark of genius in her simple approach. One of them suggested she continue practicing, that her talent could take her far if she nurtured it carefully. That evening, she returned home with her parents. They were quiet at first, allowing her to settle in. Then, finally, her mother said softly, I didn't know you could do that." Her father nodded, his eyes serious. "It's more than just playing," he said. It's music. Real music." She smiled faintly, feeling a warmth inside her. Finally, the people closest to her could see a piece of what she had always known about herself. The days that followed were different. People at school looked at her differently, some with curiosity, others with admiration. They asked her to play little tunes during class events, and she began to gain confidence performing for small audiences. Each time she played, she learned more about how to communicate her feelings through the piano, how to connect with others without speaking. Even the neighbors who had once dismissed her music began to take notice. One afternoon, a few of them stopped by, asking her to play for them. She did so quietly, carefully, letting the simple tune grow into something more complex and expressive. By the end, their eyes were wide, their hands clapping in appreciation. She realized then that music had power, not just to express what she felt, but to touch others in ways words could not. The small girl also began to think more seriously about the future. Perhaps this music could lead to opportunities she had never imagined. Perhaps she could learn more formally, meet teachers who could guide her, and explore the depths of her talent in ways she could not do alone. The thought was exciting but also a little frightening. It meant leaving the comfort of her home, stepping into a world that was larger, more complicated, and less certain. Still, she felt ready. The showcase had shown her what was possible. She had seen the effect her music could have on others. She had discovered that even a simple tune could reveal layers of emotion and skill that no one expected. And deep inside, she knew that this was only the beginning. The piano in her living room, the quiet afternoons, the small experiments, they were all preparation for something bigger, something extraordinary. Her confidence grew slowly but steadily. She practiced every day, experimenting with rhythm, tone, and melody. She began to develop a personal style, a way of playing that was unmistakably hers. Sometimes she would play softly, almost shyly, letting the notes drift gently. Other times, she would burst into faster, more dramatic passages, surprising even herself with the intensity of the emotion she could convey. Each day, the piano became more than an instrument. It became an extension of her own voice, a way to speak without words. She also began to notice that her music inspired others, even in small ways. Her sister practiced singing more often, inspired by the melodies she played. A classmate started trying to play an instrument for the first time, encouraged by her courage. And in the quiet moments when she played for her parents, she could see their stress and worries melt away, replaced by smiles and quiet admiration. Through it all, she remained humble. She did not see herself as better than anyone else. She simply played because it felt right, because it was who she was. But the small victories, the moments of recognition, the realization that her music mattered to others, all of it strengthened the fire inside her. She was beginning to understand that her gift was rare, precious, and meant to be shared with the world. And so, the small girl continued her journey. The showcase had been the first step, a glimpse of what could be. The applause, the recognition, the small sense of pride, they were all encouragement to keep moving forward. She had discovered a truth she had always felt, that even the simplest beginnings, a few notes pressed on an old piano, could lead to something extraordinary. Her fingers returned to the keys each day, ready to explore new melodies, new emotions, new possibilities. The spark of genius within her had begun to glow brighter, and the world was slowly starting to notice. What had once been a quiet secret in a small living room was beginning to ripple outward, reaching ears, hearts, and minds that had never imagined such beauty could come from someone so small, playing a tune so basic. After the school showcase, the small girl began to feel a mixture of excitement and uncertainty. Her talent had been noticed, and for the first time, people were speaking to her about her music seriously. Teachers, neighbors, and even a few local musicians had come to see her play. Some offered encouragement, some advice, and a few even hinted at opportunities she had never imagined. Yet, with recognition came pressure. She could feel it in the way adults watched her, the way whispers followed her at school, and the subtle expectations that seemed to grow heavier with every performance. One day, a letter arrived for her at school. It was an invitation to perform at a small community music competition. The girl had never competed before. The thought made her nervous, and yet there was a spark of curiosity. She had always played for herself, for the joy of music, but this was different. People would judge her not just for her effort, but for the quality of her music, for how well she could perform under pressure. The excitement and fear mingled in her chest, making it hard to think clearly. Her parents tried to reassure her. "It's just another experience," her mother said gently. "You don't have to be perfect. Just play how you feel." Her father nodded. "Remember, it's your music, not anyone else's. Trust yourself." The girl listened, trying to take comfort in their words, but a small knot of worry remained. What if she faltered in front of the audience? What if the judges didn't understand her style, her improvisations, the feelings behind her notes? In the days leading up to the competition, she practiced more seriously than ever. She returned to the living room piano, her small fingers dancing over the keys, as she experimented with melodies she had never played in public. She tried variations on simple tunes, weaving small improvisations into her performance, testing how far she could push herself. Every mistake was a lesson. Every successful sequence gave her confidence. Slowly, she began to feel ready, though the nervous flutter in her stomach never completely left. The day of the competition arrived, and the girl found herself standing in a hall larger than the community center from her previous showcase. There were dozens of children, all lined up and waiting for their turn. Some had their instruments polished to shine, some had sheet music neatly organized, and some were already practicing quietly in the corner. She felt a pang of intimidation. These children had been preparing for competitions for months, while she had only followed her own curiosity and love for music. She wondered if her improvisations and simple tunes would measure up. Her turn came and she walked toward the piano. The stage lights were bright, and the audience seemed enormous. Parents, teachers, and judges filled the seats, their eyes focused on her. She felt the familiar flutter of nervousness, but this time it was stronger. She could hear the faint hum of conversation around her, the shuffle of papers from the judge's table, the soft tapping of feet. Her small hands hovered above the keys, unsure for just a moment, before she pressed down on the first note. The music flowed, cautious at first, then bolder, stronger. She played with care, adding small variations to the simple tune she had chosen. The audience listened, polite at first, but soon her music began to capture their attention. The notes seemed alive, carrying emotion she had not even realized she was expressing. Her improvisations slipped in seamlessly, unexpected turns that made the melody feel fresh and unique. The judges leaned forward, whispering to each other. Some of the children in the audience stopped their restless movements, listening intently. Halfway through, a sudden challenge came. One of the judges clapped unexpectedly. A subtle interruption meant to test her ability to adapt. Her small hands faltered for a fraction of a second, but she recovered quickly, turning the interruption into part of the melody. She improvised, weaving the unexpected sound into her tune so naturally that it seemed intentional. The audience noticed the shift, and a few faces lit up in surprise. They could sense that she was not just performing a song, but telling a story with every note. By the time she reached the final passage, her confidence had grown. Her fingers moved fluidly, her mind focused, her heart fully invested. She added a few of the daring variations she had been practicing in secret, letting the melody soar higher, fall deeper, and linger longer than expected. The hall was quiet, every listener caught in the spell of her music. Some felt their eyes grow wet with emotion, some smiled softly, and others simply sat still, unable to move as they absorbed the brilliance of her playing. When the last note faded, silence hung for a heartbeat. Then, applause erupted. The judges clapped, some standing, some nodding in astonishment. The audience cheered, not just for the small girl, but for the music itself. It was not the loud, boisterous applause of excitement alone. It was the quiet, profound recognition of something rare and beautiful. She sat there, stunned, heart pounding, unsure if it was really happening. The small girl who had once played alone in her living room was being celebrated for her talent, for her courage, for the way her music had touched others. After the performance, one of the judges approached her. "You have an extraordinary gift," they said. "Most children your age cannot express this much emotion through music. You think beyond what you've been taught. You create." The girl felt a mixture of pride and humility. She had always known she loved music, but to hear it spoken of this way, to realize that her private melodies could be understood and appreciated, was a revelation. Other children came up as well, curious and admiring. They asked how she had learned, how she could play so freely. She explained simply that she played what she felt, what she imagined, what she heard in her head. It was not about training, she said, it was about listening, observing, and letting the music speak. Some nodded, inspired. Others looked skeptical. But even they could not deny the power in her performance. Her parents were waiting backstage, their faces glowing. Her mother hugged her tightly. "We always knew you had something special," she said. Her father smiled, pride shining in his eyes. "You played like no one else could. That was your music, your voice. And everyone could hear it." The small girl felt warmth and gratitude, a quiet satisfaction that went beyond applause or recognition. She had shared something deeply personal, and it had been received with understanding and respect. The competition results were announced later that day. The small girl did not win first place, but that did not matter. What mattered was the recognition, the understanding, the way she had faced her fear and turned it into something beautiful. One of the judges spoke privately with her parents, suggesting that she be given opportunities to study music more formally, to explore her talent with guidance and support. The girl listened quietly, feeling a mixture of excitement and nervousness. This could be the start of something new, a path she had never dared to imagine. In the days following the competition, her life subtly shifted. People began to see her differently. Not just as the quiet small girl who played simple tunes at home, but as someone with a real gift, someone whose music carried depth, emotion, and originality. Teachers asked her to perform during school events. Neighbors requested small private performances. Even children who had once ignored her now watched her closely, curious and respectful. She felt a new kind of responsibility. Her music could no longer exist solely for herself. It had the power to reach others, to move them, to inspire them. The small girl continued to practice more diligently than ever. She experimented with new styles, learned to control dynamics and timing more deliberately, and explored improvisation with increasing skill. Her hands became stronger, more precise, and more expressive. But she never lost the joy, the curiosity, the sense of wonder that had first drawn her to the piano. Every note, every melody, every rhythm was still about discovery, about emotion, about connection. Sometimes, at night, she would lie in bed and replay her performance in her mind. She could feel every note, every variation, every reaction of the audience. She thought about the small moments, the unexpected clap, the subtle gasps, the faces softened by emotion. And she realized something important. Talent alone was not enough. Courage, persistence, and the willingness to share what was inside her were just as important. Without them, her music might have remained hidden, unheard, and unappreciated. Her parents noticed the change as well. They saw her confidence growing, her sense of purpose deepening, and her willingness to embrace challenges. They supported her quietly, letting her take the lead, stepping in only when needed. They could not always understand the depths of her music, but they trusted her instincts, her heart, and her commitment. And in doing so, they helped her grow even more. The small girl began to dream bigger. She imagined performing in larger halls, in front of audiences who had never heard her music before. She imagined studying with teachers who could guide her, learning techniques she had not yet discovered, and exploring styles she had never dared to try. The world seemed larger, brighter, and more full of possibilities than ever before. She understood that her journey was only beginning, that each performance, each practice session, each small risk was a step toward something extraordinary. And so, the small girl continued. She played every day, sometimes alone, sometimes for family, sometimes for small audiences. She explored, experimented, and refined her skill. She faced challenges, moments of doubt, and occasional mistakes. But each experience taught her something new. Each note, each melody, each improvisation brought her closer to understanding not just music, but herself. Through it all, one truth remained clear. Her music was more than sound. It was a reflection of her heart, her mind, her imagination, and her courage. It had the power to move, to inspire, and to reveal a hidden brilliance that had been waiting to emerge. And as she looked ahead, she knew that the fire within her, the talent that had first been dismissed as simple or childish, would continue to grow, illuminating every step of the journey ahead. After the community music competition, the small girl's life began to change in ways she had never expected. She still returned to her old piano at home every day, but now she felt a new sense of purpose. Each key she pressed, each melody she imagined, became part of a larger journey. She knew she could no longer play solely for herself. Her music had power to move, to inspire, to touch people, and she wanted to explore it further. One afternoon, a local music teacher visited her home. She had heard about the girl's performance at the competition and wanted to see her play. The girl felt nervous at first, unsure what the teacher expected. She sat down at the piano and began to play a simple tune, one she had been practicing for weeks. The teacher listened silently, her face calm but attentive. She did not speak until the girl finished, letting the last note fade in the quiet room. "That was beautiful," the teacher said finally. "But you have so much more potential. You're not just playing tunes, you're creating music. You need guidance to reach the level you are capable of." The girl's heart raced. She had always dreamed of learning more, but she never imagined someone would offer to help her so directly. The teacher explained that she could come once a week to learn new techniques, study music theory, and explore more complex compositions. The small girl nodded, excitement and nervousness mixing in equal measure. She was ready, though the thought of structured lessons was new and a little intimidating. Her first lesson was challenging. The teacher introduced her to scales, rhythm exercises, and sheet music she had never studied before. At first, it felt like a puzzle she could not solve. Notes and symbols that had always seemed distant and abstract now demanded her full attention. She struggled with finger placement, with timing, and with following structured patterns rather than her own intuition. Yet, with each small success, she felt a thrill she had never known. The teacher encouraged her to combine what she had learned with her natural style. "Don't lose what makes your playing unique," she said. "Your improvisation, your feeling, your voice. Keep that. But now we will give you tools to shape it even more." Over the next weeks, the girl practiced tirelessly. She began to understand the rules behind the music she had always felt instinctively. She learned how to read sheet music more accurately, how to control the dynamics of each note, and how to structure longer compositions. She experimented with timing, using pauses and emphasis to make her melodies even more expressive. Slowly, her improvisations became richer, her music more complex, yet it never lost the soulfulness that had always defined it. Her parents noticed the change as well. They saw her confidence growing, her hands moving more fluidly, and her mind thinking more creatively. They could hear the subtle differences in her music, the new layers of emotion and technique. They encouraged her quietly, proud of how far she had come, yet careful not to pressure her. For the small girl, the journey was personal. She wanted to explore, to discover, and to push herself, but she wanted to do it on her own terms. Word of her talent began to spread. Neighbors, teachers, and local musicians all spoke of the girl who played music with feeling far beyond her years. Invitations came for her to perform at small community events, at local gatherings, and even at school functions. Each time, she felt a mixture of excitement and fear, but the joy of sharing her music always outweighed the nervousness. She began to see that her gift was not just for her own pleasure, it was meant to be shared. One day, a larger opportunity arrived. A well-known pianist from the nearby city heard about the small girl and wanted to meet her. The idea of playing for someone so accomplished both thrilled and terrified her. She had always admired professional musicians, imagining the skill and dedication it must take to play at such a level. Now, someone she had respected from afar was offering to hear her play, to give advice, and to potentially guide her further. The meeting took place in a small studio. The professional pianist watched silently as the girl began to play. Her hands moved confidently, her fingers tracing melodies she had invented, improvisations flowing naturally. The professional nodded occasionally, leaning closer to catch subtle details, watching the emotion in her playing. When the piece ended, there was silence for a moment, followed by a slow, approving smile. "You have extraordinary talent," the pianist said. "Your music is alive, full of emotion, and technically sound beyond your years. With training, guidance, and practice, you could go far. I want to help you reach that level." The small girl's heart soared. She had dreamed of learning more, but now someone experienced was willing to guide her. The idea of formal mentorship was new, but she felt ready. She wanted to push herself, to learn everything she could, to see how far her music could take her. The mentorship began with small sessions. The pianist introduced her to new techniques, scales, and compositions. He helped her understand harmony and rhythm in deeper ways. He encouraged her to experiment, to create her own compositions while respecting classical structures. At first, the lessons were challenging, sometimes even frustrating. She struggled with complex pieces, with techniques that felt unnatural, and with the discipline required for structured practice. Yet, every small victory brought her immense satisfaction. Over time, her playing became more refined. She could express subtle emotions, shift moods mid-piece, and capture complex feelings in ways that astonished both her mentors and listeners. Her improvisations became more daring, yet controlled. She learned to balance structure and freedom, technique and emotion, complexity, and simplicity. Her music was no longer just notes on a piano. It was storytelling, emotion, and connection. Meanwhile, her confidence grew beyond the piano. She began to speak more freely, to take initiative, and to embrace challenges in other areas of her life. Her schoolwork improved, and she found herself participating more actively in class. Music had taught her focus, patience, and resilience, skills that extended far beyond the instrument. The girl also faced moments of doubt. Sometimes, despite her progress, she wondered if she was truly talented, if she could ever reach the level she dreamed of. Sometimes mistakes frustrated her, and she questioned whether she was ready for bigger stages. But each time, she returned to the piano, letting her fingers speak what her mind and heart could not. The music reminded her why she had started, why she had persisted, and why she could not give up. Her parents continued to support her quietly, proud of her dedication but careful not to impose pressure. They saw her growth, her resilience, and the joy she found in music. They understood that her journey was personal, and that true talent required space, freedom, and encouragement rather than force. Their trust gave her confidence to explore and take risks. With mentorship and practice, the girl's music began to draw attention from wider circles. Local newspapers wrote about her performances. Community events requested her presence. Even regional competitions invited her to perform. Each opportunity brought new challenges, larger audiences, unfamiliar pianos, stricter judges, but also new rewards, recognition, learning, and the joy of sharing her gift. Through it all, she remained humble. She knew that talent alone was not enough. Hard work, curiosity, and persistence were equally important. She never forgot the simple afternoons spent playing in her living room, discovering the fire hidden in her small hands. That fire, once untapped, had begun to grow steadily, fed by passion, guidance, and experience. The small girl also began to compose her own music more seriously. She experimented with combining styles, blending classical techniques with improvisation, creating melodies that felt unique and alive. She would spend hours at the piano, trying small ideas, discarding some, keeping others, shaping them until they reflected exactly what she felt. Each composition was a personal story, a reflection of her journey, a glimpse of the genius she had nurtured since childhood. Her mentors recognized the depth of her talent and encouraged her to pursue further opportunities. They helped her enter competitions, suggested performances in larger venues, and guided her in honing her skills. The girl listened carefully, absorbing knowledge, but always keeping her personal style intact. She learned to balance guidance with intuition, training with freedom, and structure with creativity. Through this period, she also learned an important lesson. Music was not just about skill, but about connection. Her compositions, her performances, her improvisations, they mattered because they reached people's hearts. The joy of music lay not in applause or awards, but in the ability to touch, inspire, and move others. She understood that true talent was not measured only by technique, but by the emotion and meaning behind it. And so, the small girl continued her journey. Each day, each lesson, each performance brought new growth. The piano had become more than an instrument. It was her voice, her companion, and her means of exploring the world. The once simple tunes she had played in secret were now evolving into rich, complex, expressive compositions. Her fire, long hidden, was no longer small or quiet. It had grown into a steady, bright flame, guiding her forward into a world of music, opportunity, and discovery. The small girl had come a long way since the first day she pressed her fingers to the piano keys at home. She had faced doubts, challenges, competitions, and intense lessons. Yet each step had made her stronger, more confident, and more in tune with her music. Now, she stood on the brink of an opportunity that felt far larger than anything she had ever imagined. An invitation arrived from a prestigious regional music festival. This was a place where skilled young musicians from across the area would perform. The festival was known for its discerning audiences, strict judges, and high standards. The girl felt a flutter of nervousness when she read the letter. This was not a small community event or a friendly school competition. This was something far more important, a stage where her talent could truly be seen and tested. Her parents were supportive, though they sensed her nerves. "You've come so far," her mother said softly. "No matter what happens, you've already achieved so much." Her father added, "Remember, this is your music. Let it shine, but don't let fear control you." The girl nodded, feeling both anxious and excited. She knew the journey would not be easy, but she also knew that she had prepared for this moment through years of dedication. For weeks before the festival, she practiced more intensely than ever. Every day, she explored new melodies, experimented with rhythm, and refined her improvisations. She combined classical pieces with her own creations, learning to make the music feel alive while following the structure that the judges would expect. Some days were frustrating. Her fingers stumbled, her timing faltered, but each small failure taught her something new. She learned patience, precision, and how to turn mistakes into opportunities for creativity. On the day of the festival, she arrived early. The concert hall was enormous, much larger than any stage she had seen before. The lights shone brightly, reflecting off polished floors and gleaming instruments. The audience was filled with parents, students, and music enthusiasts. Professional musicians and judges sat at the front, their expressions calm but alert. The energy in the room was both thrilling and intimidating. Backstage, other participants were warming up, some nervously, some confidently. The girl felt her stomach tighten. She had performed in front of audiences before, but never like this. She thought about her past experiences, the first school showcase, the local competition, the lessons with her mentor. Each memory reminded her that she was capable. She took a deep breath, letting the nerves settle into excitement. When it was her turn, she walked to the piano, the polished keys gleaming under the spotlight. She sat down, letting her hands hover for a moment before touching the first key. The hall grew quiet as the first notes filled the space. Her music began simply, softly, almost like a whisper. But as she continued, the tune grew richer, layered with emotion, depth, and nuance. Every note seemed to tell a story, weaving together years of practice, experience, and passion. The audience was captivated. At first, they listened politely, but soon they were drawn into the music. Each subtle variation, each shift in tempo, each pause carried meaning. The judges leaned forward, observing carefully. They noticed the confidence in her fingers, the clarity in her expression, and the maturity in her interpretation. This was not just a child playing music. This was a musician expressing herself fully, with control, creativity, and heart. Halfway through her performance, she improvised a new section. She allowed her emotions to guide her, adding unexpected harmonies and shifting rhythms. The hall seemed to hold its breath. Some audience members exchanged glances, amazed at the depth and originality of the music. Others closed their eyes, letting the sound wash over them. The girl felt a sense of freedom and purpose she had never experienced before. She was no longer playing for recognition or applause. She was playing for herself and for the music itself, and the audience could feel it. As the final notes faded, the hall was silent for a moment, as if no one wanted to break the magic. Then, the applause began, soft at first, then louder, swelling into a standing ovation. The girl's heart raced. She had never heard anything like it. People were clapping, cheering, and some even wiped away tears. She had shared her music completely, and it had touched every listener in the room. Afterward, the judges approached her. "You have extraordinary talent," one said. "Your understanding of music, your technique, and your creativity are beyond your years. You have the potential to become a professional musician if you continue to nurture your gift." Another added, "We have rarely seen such originality combined with technical skill. You are a rare talent." The girl felt a mixture of pride and humility. She had worked hard, faced challenges, and remained true to herself, and now her efforts were recognized. She realized that all the small performances, The lessons, the competitions, and the late-night practices had prepared her for this moment. She had discovered her true potential, and now the world was beginning to see it too. Her parents hugged her tightly, tears in their eyes. "We are so proud of you," her mother whispered. "You have shown courage, dedication, and heart. This is just the beginning." Her father added, "You've always had this fire inside you. Now everyone else can see it too." The girl smiled quietly, feeling warmth and gratitude. She knew that her journey had only begun, but she had already achieved something remarkable. In the days that followed, opportunities began to multiply. She was invited to perform at regional concerts, music schools, and community events. Teachers and mentors offered scholarships and programs to help her continue her development. Each invitation brought excitement and challenge, but the girl welcomed them. She felt ready to explore the world of music further, to share her talent more widely, and to grow as both a musician and a person. The small girl also began to compose more seriously. She created pieces that reflected her journey, her struggles, and her emotions. Each composition was unique, blending her natural improvisation with the techniques she had learned. She discovered that music could express feelings that words could not. Joy, sadness, hope, and determination all found a voice through her piano. She began to understand that her gift was not just about playing beautifully. It was about touching people's hearts and inspiring them. Her friends, family, and teachers noticed the change in her. She was more confident, more disciplined, and more expressive. She carried herself with a quiet assurance that came from knowing her talent and understanding its value. Yet, she remained humble, never forgetting the long journey she had taken to reach this point. She still practiced daily, still explored melodies in her living room, and still allowed herself to make mistakes, knowing that every error was a step toward growth. One day, a well-known music academy invited her to perform for a panel of professional musicians. This was an even larger stage with highly skilled performers from across the country. The girl felt nervous, but also excited. She understood that each performance was a learning experience. She approached the piano with determination, letting her fingers glide over the keys with confidence. The music flowed, intricate yet natural, technical yet full of feeling. The panel of musicians watched in awe. They recognized her skill, creativity, and emotional depth. One of them, a renowned pianist, said afterward, "This young musician has something truly special. Rarely do we see a performer who can combine originality, emotion, and technical mastery at such a young age. She has the potential to inspire generations of listeners." The small girl's journey had reached a new milestone. She had begun as a quiet child with a simple tune, playing alone in a living room. She had faced fear, challenges, and uncertainty. She had learned, practiced, and persevered. And now, her music had reached a wider world, touching hearts and inspiring others. She had transformed from a small girl with a hidden gift into a young musician whose talent was recognized, celebrated, and deeply respected. As she continued to perform, learn, and compose, the girl understood an important truth. Talent alone was never enough. Hard work, courage, persistence, and the willingness to share her gift were equally important. She had discovered that the most powerful music comes from the heart, from emotion, and from authenticity. It is music that speaks truthfully, freely, and boldly, and she had found that voice within herself. Her journey was far from over. There were more stages to play on, more pieces to compose, more challenges to face. Yet, she faced the future with excitement rather than fear. She knew that her small beginnings, her first simple tunes, and her quiet afternoons at the piano had prepared her for this moment. They had given her a foundation of passion, creativity, and resilience that could carry her anywhere. In the end, the small girl realized that her talent had always been part of her, waiting to be nurtured, discovered, and shared. The fire within her, once hidden and quiet, had grown into a steady, bright flame. It would continue to guide her through challenges, inspire her music, and reach the hearts of everyone who listened. She had discovered not just her talent, but her purpose, and she would continue to follow it, one note at a time. And so, the small girl's story became a testament to the power of perseverance, passion, and self-belief. A simple tune, played with sincerity and love, had revealed a lifetime of untapped, fiery genius. It reminded everyone that greatness often begins quietly, in small moments, and grows through courage, dedication, and heart. Her journey had only just begun, but the world could already see the extraordinary potential hidden in the hands of a small girl and her piano.